Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our dungeon reviews, and let us step aboard the Maw of Souls. What is the Maw of Souls? The Maw of Souls is Legion's answer to Grimrail Depot, which I think many of us could agree didn't really benefit from being aboard a train. In fact, it gave us the idea of being in one corridor and didn't really hit the mark in terms of what they were trying to do. And I think Blizzard has done a good job here in realizing, one, the game just isn't capable of really doing something fancy with that idea of being on something that's moving. They've tried in the past with Spine of Deathwing. Oh my god. Grimrail Depot, they had the wind effect, but we've had that in any dungeon anyway, and ultimately did turn into one long, never-ending fucking corridor, which just wasn't that interesting ultimately. It never really gave that real sense of claustrophobia that they tried to get out of those. They're supposed to feel enclosed. It didn't really hit that mark, unfortunately. So with the Maw of Souls, how have they gone about it? They've gone about it very cleverly, in fact. The environment is wonderful, and the way they've gone about it is by making you only about on the boat, or on the actual deck of the boat, for about 20-25% of the dungeon. The rest of the dungeon is actually spent either on the harbour, or actually in the bowels and the guts of the ship below decks, dealing with the things going on there. And by that, they create a great claustrophobic environment. This is how it's done correctly, in my opinion, because they're not trying to be like, you're on a train, isn't that fucking amazing? And this time they're like, you're on a boat, isn't that amazing? No, we know that's gonna be cool, but let's save it till the end and not make such a big deal out of it. Let's give it that end result. And they do. They go out with a fucking smash in this dungeon. They really do. They've outdone themselves. Certainly one of my favorites so far in Legion is the Maw of Souls. So how does it play out? As I said, you start in the harbour, and many of your players, I won't say the game because people get upset when I say the game, but let's just say you start out in a very ghostly harbour, and then you have to blow a horn and a ghost ship will come. I'm not mentioning the game, but that's what it's. It will certainly remind you as you get there, if you've played the game, that you'll be like, oh, I see what you've gone from here. And it very much wears its inspirations on the sleeve in this dungeon. I was very surprised not to see something like Johnny Sparrow or Jack Depp hanging about on the ghost ship, because yeah, it's Pirates of the Caribbean through and through. Even from the I forget the barnacles and stuff, like littering the floors, and the seaweed, and the ghoulish mobs that hang around on board ship. Very, very cool. So it does have this very claustrophobic environment. How's the trash then? The trash is cool. The trash hurts a lot. It's probably overtuned right now in the normal mode for some of the trash. I've had tanks get smashed. And again, they've gone from a similar idea, which is something we'll talk about in Dark Art Thicket, which is that if you pull the trash correctly, like in a slow, methodical manner, where you get each pack and you deal with each pack on its own, it's not too bad. It's not too bad at all. However, the way they've designed the trash is if you get 2 packs, you do that accidental ninja pull, and they create plenty of opportunities for you to accidentally ninja pull. A lot of patrolling, like prison guards below deck. You end up in a prison, by the way. You get jailed. A lot of patrolling guards below decks carrying their lanterns between the rooms. And if you happen to cause that chain pull, you're probably fucked unless you're prepared for it. There are several occasions when I was tanking. I did this on a Paladin and a Vengeance Demon Hunter, I should say, where I saw the ninja pull coming in my fucking bird's eye vision. I was like, uh-oh, I hope that guy moves. I hope that guy, surely he's gonna move, right? He's not gonna move. Okay, he's been seen. That chains into the next pack, and then suddenly it's like, okay, pop all cooldowns, go mate, I turn into a big giant fucking demon to deal with this situation. Oh my god, my face. So tanking it was actually a lot of fun. Doing controlled speed pulls, very nice. I love that style of tanking. It's my favorite. It's not just like Zerg, get everything because nothing can kill me, and start AoEing. It's about what can I handle based on what my healer can do, and making very safe, very speedy pulls. This place is primed for that. So if you like that style of more thought out tanking, I'd say a more cerebral style of speed tanking, rather than just get as much as shit as possible and try and just AoE it down, you're gonna have a really good time in it, because you can't just like AoE everything down. Each mob contains certain mobs that need to be dealt with in different ways, whether they turn into ghosts and try and stab bystanders. So it's not enough just to have aggro, whether they're trying to silence you, whether they're trying to debuff you, or whether they're trying to cast something on you, whether they're trying to bait you. Baiting is a big part of Legion. So you'll have a caster mob who will chain cast something, So your average DPS is going to interrupt that rather than like hit the tank or whatever. And when that happens, he's like, right, you've used your interrupt, and now I'm going to cast this thing. And it's like, oh, fuck, that thing is so much worse, bro. That thing is so much worse. Which is great, because it provides a lot of interest, because you're not just AoEing as fast as possible, you're also paying attention to what each of the individual trash is doing. You're shifting priorities, you're making focuses, you're doing all those kinds of things. And this really pulls it off. It's a very atmospheric dungeon, and the trash adds to that in so many ways. And there's not a lot of it, which I love. There's a mini-boss in there. there. So you're basically doing like no more than 2 trash packs, I want to say. I don't think you do more than 2 major trash packs before you either hit a mini boss, which is a mini boss, or you hit an actual boss. And that's so cool. Because it doesn't need to be a long dungeon like Blackrock Hole. It's like really long with loads of trash. So you got to do maybe 10 trash packs in there. Oh, that's probably a bit exaggerating. Like 6 trash packs before you hit something else of interest. And it's frustrating trash. This isn't frustrating. If the only way you're going to die in the trash in here is if you fuck up. And that's the way it should be. Like if you fucked up, you know you fucked up. You know where the mistake was made. And that's really cool. So props to them. So let's talk about the bosses then. How do they fit into this really wonderful environment? Very well. Very well, and I see the doors opening for some really interesting challenge mode stuff. If we start with the first boss, this is going to be the Dance boss. Not only does he have an AoE fear, which can be dispelled in normal mode, I'm hoping that it can't be dispelled in challenge modes, because what I found is the tank, when I was doing my healers, the tanks would realize I was dispelling them so quickly, I could see them try and run out, because you can actually get out of range of it. It gives you like the aura on the floor, and you can get out of range, and then runs back in. That's what you're supposed to do. What I noticed that if the tank got caught in it, I was dispelling him so quickly that he was just not moving after that, right? The tank was like, oh, healer's got it, no problem. And I really hope that's not the case, and the tanks get punished for that as much as the DPS do, because with the dispel cooldowns, you can't do everybody unless you're playing a priest, which is the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be able to sort of deal with the debuffs on a sort of one-on-one basis, or even prioritize the debuffs. And I think that is a very cool way of doing it. So I'm hoping the sphere isn't sort of breakable. And also, it's a very large open room. And I'll say this in probably another dungeon as well, is when I walk into a large open room in a 5 and I'm like, oh shit. Something bad is really going to happen in here. And he did give us a glimpse of that by pouring the glaze. He blows you around with like a cyclone effect, and he also drops like purple things all over the floor. And there are not many of them. They really hurt, but there's not many of them. You know in challenge mode that is like going to be so fucking busy in there. Trying to think of Cromog, or is it Cromog in Hellfire Citadel, you know, when it starts to really fill up. If you've ever done that on Mythic mode, you'll know what I'm talking about, where it's like, oh shit, okay, this huge room just turned into a fucking living nightmare. And this boss has plenty of opportunity to do that. He also has very cool tank stuff to deal with. He has something for everybody to deal with. The ranged have to deal really carefully with this floor space. The melee have to deal with the fear. The tanks have to deal with incoming special attacks that you have to mitigate. I think that's very cool. I think it's a really nice opening first boss. And certainly not in the normal mode. He's really easy. You could just zerg him down. But you're supposed to be able to do that while getting a glimpse of what else he can do. As you move through the dungeon, though, things get even more interesting, and I really like that. This is the boss that actually rips your soul apart. Yeah, we've seen this mechanic elsewhere before. Ripping the souls of certain people apart. Leotheras springs to mind. All kinds of things where they pick a player and then they start spawning mobs out of that into going to do sort of terrible things unless you deal with it. And I think that is really a really cool thing. And this boss is very much about that. And I'm not going to spoil it too much, but if you let these things wander about, yeah, don't really want to be doing that. And I've got to point out here, a lot of people say the WoW community is terrible, terrible, terrible. And I don't believe that. I think overall they have got better. And this was kind of proof of it, although Alpha is sort of a select group, but not that select anymore. But I certainly noticed in every group I was in, people who clearly never been to the dungeon before, as soon as they saw these things like ripping the souls of their friends apart or their compadres, they were certainly on the fucking case to deal with that situation super fast. They were like, oh shit, ads, you know they're going to do something terrible. We better deal with this. And at this point, this is where we've come onto the deck of the ship. And you're getting the idea is like, we're on a ghost galleon going through the ocean and there's fucking cyclones, all kinds of fucking bad weather. And you're like, oh fuck. And it shits on Grimrail Depot, which is what it should do. It absolutely shits on Grimrail Depot. And I certainly was one of the guys who was looking over the side of the ship thinking, this is really cool. We are riding through a storm on an old school ghost galleon through the ocean. This is awesome. And how can they possibly finish this off? So you'll encounter, I'm not even sure if this guy's supposed to be another mini-boss. There's another mini-boss along the way. I'm not going to spoil what he does because it's not particularly hard. But then we come up against the last boss. So I can't really spoil it too much, but let's just say rather large with a big bosom and has a huge storyline in one of the zones. And they thrust you into her bosom, quite literally. And again, it's a throwback to Pirates of the Caribbean in terms of the, I'm going to forget the fucking name of it now. The Kraken. we're going to deal with a Kraken in one or two ways. Not quite Ozomat, not quite Ozomat from the Throne of Tides, but still a Kraken is involved in some way. And I can really see what they're going to do with challenge mode here, because this fight is difficult the first time round for every group. And I found, I wasn't sure where the difficulty was coming from. Like, when I DPS'd it, it seemed quite obvious to me, but we wiped. When we came back, I did what I was doing anyway, and that worked because everybody else started doing the same thing. It's definitely reminiscent of other fights we've done in the past with a lot of priority shifting in terms of DPS targets. A lot of that going on. But again, it's a multi-phase fight. It's super fucking cool. I would hope that you guys look at it and go, yeah, this is pretty fucking badass. Now let's point to the elephant in the room in here, though. In order to make it look as epic as it actually is, they fuck your camera up. Tectus style. Now, if you never did Tectus, well, most of you should have done Tectus. Most of you should have done it at least in the LFR version if you were collecting your Legendary Ring, which I assume most of you tried to do at some point. Yeah, you'll know of Tectus just wrecking your camera and giving it, like, no mobility at all. And they do that in spades in here. Your camera is so immobile, it is ridiculous. Because the area you fight in is really small. Really, very, very small. And they are doing it on purpose. When I first did the dungeon on my Arcane Mage, while I was still sort of messing around with how Arcane plays, I thought this is awful. This is really bad. I can't really see what's going on besides having the boss, like, thrust into my face, and she's enormous. But then, as I did it a couple more times, I was like, this is totally intentional. This is the way they want this to be, because the fight looks better visually and from an entertainment and a game standpoint from this perspective. If I could have my way, I would probably just be looking at the floor and trying to ignore the boss, because there's not much for me to tell from the boss. And they don't want you to do that. They want you to be sort of face-to-face with her all the time. And that works out really well. As much as I think more higher level players won't like that, because they'll be quite happy to stare at the floor for the entire encounter to get proper mobility and to avoid all the stuff that's going on in the fight. It is actually more cinematic, and it does feel more rewarding and more fun, if I'm being completely honest, from an encounter itself perspective, not necessarily gameplay wise, to have the camera more fixed and force you to stare down the belly of the beast. I could see it's going to be a point of contention and people getting really angry about the camera angles and stuff at the end of the last boss. But I really think that it's done intentionally at this point, because of the way it's designed. I think it's totally done that way. And ultimately, it's such a cool boss. It's chaos from start to finish. It is absolute chaos, this fight. And I cannot wait to see what they do in the challenge modes. I'm really excited about the challenge modes. They give this opening door for putting in proper difficult 5-mans with lots going on. And if they start chaotic in normal, God, what they have waiting for us in challenge mode. And I can see the things they're going to do with making split DPS definitely in phase 1 and forcing people to do other things. Because right now, there's only like one danger in phase 1 where there's definitely options to be multiple. And yeah, it's looking good. I really like this dungeon. It's so cool. It's atmospheric. It's fast. It doesn't take too long. It keeps its pace all the way through. It's got huge risks and huge payoffs if you get through it. And I'm looking forward to working out how you speedrun this fucker and push the challenge on it. That, my ladies and gentlemen, is the Maw of Souls. Look forward to it, because it's cool.